Okay, the Second Boer War brings us to 1899 in South Africa. And the small group we talk about today is under the leadership of Baden-Powell, and he has 1,200 troops, most of them mounted, and his mission was to control 500 miles of the border, the northern border. And what he does is he has a nice railroad town called Mafeking, where he decides to put all his stores. And then he just decides to, rather than send out his troops on patrol, he just decides to stay there. So that gives us the lead up of our situation as to why there's a siege. The Boers, who are mostly farmers in the area, number about 6,000 people. The residents of Mafeking number about 1,700 whites and 7,500 natives. And what Baden-Powell does is he sets up a 6-mile perimeter around town. And in the course of the siege, there's various cannon fire, there's various guns, shots and stuff, and but mostly it's skirmish. Don't have a lot of rifles. They're woefully short on ammunition, and they just basically lay into a siege situation. They don't fire on the town on Sundays. It's like a gentleman's agreement. Don't bother the Black community as long as they're not being used by Baden-Powell to run messages. And pretty much they end up an average of 6 shells a day that the Boers fire in. In the course of the 270-day siege, we have 20 British officers killed, 190 British soldiers killed, about 500 or more Boers killed, and an uncounted number of Blacks. As with most sieges, there becomes a shortage of cash. First, a shortage of stamps, and then a shortage of cash. So what the postmaster tells Baden-Powell to do, because he's already overprinted all the stamps in town for the siege, he says, issue your own stamps. Well, I'm not going to talk about the stamp. There's 16 varieties of stamps. What I do want to share with you is just some views of the surrounding town as it looks today, the siege, mostly to house stuff memorializing the event. The grassland is as it looked then, as it looks today. Many of the British soldiers were buried in town. So what we have starting in January of 1900, Baden-Powell starts issuing paper money. It's done by the local printer, and there are 2 colors. The value is an overprint color. In this case, 1 shilling is green. So we do a 1 shilling, 2 shilling, 3 shilling. All of the issued banknotes have a very nice, what they call a blind emboss tax stamp. And here you see it usually right under the seal in the center. All the February notes are serial number prefix B. The January notes are serial prefix A's. And in the course of both the A and the B series, about 6,900 1 shilling notes are printed. This is a pretty cool item that's recently come on the market after being in a collection of a major collector for over 30 years. It's the 1 shilling note as issued. They were issued in pads, 40 notes, 20 shillings to a pound. So 2 pounds would get you a package of 40 notes. And you can see the double holes here for staples, and you can see the perforation, and then the matching serial number on the counterfoil. Later notes were not sold with the counterfoil perforation, but they were stapled, and even regular notes do get staple holes. It's not a detracting thing to get on a real note. Expect to find staple holes, expect to find the tax stamp. The 2 shilling notes start with a much higher serial number. They start at 5,001, and they estimate about 5,600 or 5,700 printed. The 3 shilling note is the scarcest, even though it's printed in both January and February. They only issued about 850 of them. The most famous of the group is the 10 shilling, and it has 2 signatures. It not only has the paymaster's signature, but it has R. Uri's signature. These are done with transfer ink process. It's hard to explain. It's kind of goofy. I haven't gotten my head around it. But there are 2 varieties in the typesetting. There's the correct spelling of the word commanding, or there's an incorrect spelling. It's missing the D Both were issued. They were not issued in sequence, so you can't say a low serial number had the correct spelling, the high serial number had an incorrect spelling. The serial number ranges mix in the run, so it's kind of a mess, actually. And they estimate about 7,000 notes were printed between the two varieties. It is also the most commonly counterfeited note in the series. Harry Thorson made a bunch of reproductions in the 60s, 70s, but this reproduction dates very close to about 1910. One clue is the serial number is in the same green ink as the rest of the note. There are no signatures, and also there was probably some nice word here like reproduction kindly eliminated due to a hole. The coolest note is the 10-pound note. 683 of these were issued using a blueprint process. These have real signatures of Mr. Urey and Mr. Grenadier as the chief paymaster. The drawing was a drawing done by Baden-Powell himself. The Wolf gun still resides in the British Military Museum in London. And it again has the tax stamp. The blueprint process is a chemical-based thing. It's done by photo negative. You could tell this was a paste up. Those of you with old printing technology, you could tell this line here is a paste up, and it wasn't quite flat when the negative was made. So thus you get this really goofy thing. The stamps were made by this process, which is why all of the stamps are blue. At the end, 2,000 troops come in from Kimberley, and after 217 days, the siege is lifted. They basically disperse the Boer forces. So the relieving forces all get a relief of Mafeking bar. Those involved in the siege, the 1,200 troops under Baden-Powell, get a Siege of Mafeking bar. This is the Queen's South Africa Medal. Those that stayed on the extra year into 1901 and 1902, Queen Victoria dies, so that most of them also get a King's South Africa Medal, showing a portrait of Edward VII. Baden-Powell created his own image in the press of the day. Because they allowed messages to get out of town under a truce flag, he sent dispatches back and was published in the London papers. People followed it. People wanted to know what was happening in Mafeking. They wanted to know who was eating the horses. They wanted to know all this other stuff. So when the siege was finally lifted, it was kind of a big deal. So Spink and Son, a famous London coin dealer, issued these medals of him holding the binoculars. And then this medal was done by another British firm. And then also available, mostly sold by newsboys in London, was this really cool Mafeking counter stamp on a large cent. So Les Brown did a thing in chat. The 683 versus 638. I know that's a little confusing. What it is 683 were the number of £1 notes that were printed, but the 638 was after 10 years, the bank was still holding the outstanding revenue for the notes issued as a debt on their books. So they basically gave public notice that you had 6 months. Otherwise, you couldn't turn these in for face value anymore. And that's where the 638 number comes. Only 638 of the outstanding balance was ever turned in. The rest was saved as souvenirs by the troops, the town residents. Some you could find signed on the back by Baden-Powell or other officers. As John reminded me, there are some 10 shilling and one pound note proofs that exist, but are really, really scarce. I just wanted to really show what's available out there. Randall asked if that's a machine gun on the 10 shilling note, and what they call it is a Maxim gun. I believe it had 8 rounds in a rotating single shot canister thing. I never saw one in person, but they do exist still in museums. Go to a website of Colin Narbith, Narbith. He has several for sale in nice condition in the 350 pound range. The £1 note these days is going to run you about $2,000 or more in the condition I showed you. And of the smaller notes, the 3 shilling is the most expensive. The type of wallets people use, you always fold it in half, and sometimes you fold it in quarters. So even the £1 notes, you always find them folded in half. And the way they're designed, if you fold them in quarters, you end up with just seeing the big red number or the big brown number.